Joining us now with the latest on all of this, we have investigative reporter Sara Carter, also a Fox News contributor, and we have Greg Jarrett, author of the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Russian Hoax. Welcome both of you to the program. Sara, let's start with all the drama that was going on today and what happened over the weekend and what happened Friday and what we expect is going to happen on Thursday when the president meets with Rod Rosenstein.
Well, everybody I've talked to, even on background, has said this is just such an extraordinary situation. We've never seen anything quite like this, in modern political history. And today's events were, Sean, nonetheless the same. I mean, it was back and forth. Everybody was on the edge of their seat. Of course, there are a lot of people that believe, as you do, as I do as well, that the leak came from the Department of Justice, that Rosenstein was expecting to be fired when he went into the White House today. And then, of course, I got a statement from Sarah Sanders later, like everyone else did, that the president and Rosenstein would be meeting on Thursday to extend their conversation about the recent news stories. And, the president's right now at the UN General Assembly, so he's got, full schedule ahead of him for the day. So he's kind of putting everything aside until Thursday. What we do know is this, is that there's been concern from the very beginning about Rod Rosenstein, his involvement in signing off on the third application renewal, the fourth and final FISA of Carter Page. He was also the same man who wrote the letter, actually a very well-written letter, about why James Comey failed at his job as the former director of the FBI, and handed that over to the president, and that was part of the impetus of why the president decided to let go of James Comey. Although we know the president now has said, I wish you would have done it on day one. I mean, I think that if Hillary Clinton had been elected, she would have done it on day one. The Democrats were screaming mad at Comey about how he handled everything, and a lot of them wanted him fired. It wasn't until the president actually did that then they came back with it's obstruction of justice. Well, how could it be obstruction if Rod Rosenstein himself is involved in it? And you're right. He's either the first witness, an eyewitness, or a co-conspirator. I mean, the guy can't oversee the special counsel. I think on Thursday, and what I'm hearing from people, the president is obviously, it's going to be up to the president to make his own determination and decision. From the people I've talked to, there's no doubt in a lot of people's minds that this was what Rod Rosenstein had said, that the New York Times article was accurate, that he wasn't just joking around. I think that it was very unexpected when the story dropped the next day, because remember, it was Rod Rosenstein who ran over to the White House in a panic, basically, that the president had declassified all those documents. And so not only did he go over there, but there was pressure from some other countries, apparently, to not let these documents go public and to turn them over to the Inspector General. And then the very next day, the New York Times, which had been working on the story for 2 months, it finally gets out. And what it appears, according to the sources that I've spoken with, is that McCabe knows he's going down. He's facing a grand jury. And now at this point in time, he's basically like, I'm not going down alone. I'm not going down on this sinking ship by myself. I'm going to take the other rats with me. And he's lashing back.
Let me go to Greg Jarrett. Greg, your take on all this.
Well, Rosenstein, at the very minimum, should be relieved of his job overseeing the special counsel case. Congress and the Inspector General should investigate these allegations that Rosenstein solicited people to secretly record the president and recruited cabinet members to depose Trump under the 25th Amendment. So Rosenstein needs to be removed from the special counsel case. Should have happened a long time ago, because he has multiple conflicts of interest. As you point out, Sean, he's a fact witness in the case. Regulations say you cannot be a prosecutor and a witness all rolled into one. And, of course, he signed the FISA warrant to renew the spying on the Trump campaign associate Carter Page. So he cannot be in charge of an investigation involving his own underlying decisions. There are serious questions as to why Rosenstein chose Bob Mueller, who interviewed to be FBI director the day before he took the job as special counsel. Was the president not advised of this? He was not. Why didn't Rosenstein tell the president that? Why didn't Mueller tell the president that? Those are glaring conflicts of interest. And, in point of fact, under the law, there should never have been a special counsel. There has to be a conflict of interest. None was stated. Sessions had recused himself. Where's the conflict? Second of all, there has to be an identified crime. None was stated in the authorization order. And finally, a special counsel under the regulations is only permitted in criminal cases. This was never a criminal case. It was a counterintelligence probe. So there should never have been a special counsel. And this tells me that Rosenstein is part of this effort to frame Trump for things he didn't do.
But that's what's now falling apart. That's what is, layer by layer, the onion has now been unpeeled here. And what we now see is that the highest levels of our Department of Justice, our FBI, and we know the names now, Strzok and Page and McCabe and Comey and Justice Yates and Orr being a conduit for Christopher Steele. At the bottom of it all is the Hillary bought and paid for dossier put together by a foreign national, Christopher Steele, and then literally disseminated and spread like total propaganda, unconfirmed, unverified, uncorroborated lies before the campaign, and then used literally through a media leak strategy that we now know exists for the very purpose of helping to set up a special counsel, that coupled with James Comey's leak actions. And when Lisa Page says there was no evidence 9 months into this of any Trump-Russia collusion of any kind, it seems that it was all one big setup.
Yeah, it was a hoax. And this is just more evidence of a cesspool of corruption at the Department of Justice and the FBI. These top officials, you just named many of them, they sought to sabotage the president with false claims, to drive him from office, to undo the election results. These are people who were sworn to uphold the law, and yet, Sean, they manipulated it for their own partisan purposes. There needs to be a serious and legitimate investigation by a real prosecutor with a presentment to a grand jury for consideration of criminal charges against the people that you just identified at the FBI and the Department of Justice.
How does somebody ever, even in a joking fashion, ever suggest that, well, do you want me to wear a wire and mount an effort to invoke the 25th Amendment?
You just don't do that, Sean. That's not the behavior. In fact, that's not his normal behavior, according to people that I've spoken to. He's a pretty serious guy, Rod Rosenstein.
Yeah, but he also has a vicious temper. That has been reported to me by numerous people.
Absolutely, and a vicious temper. I mean, he would have to actually talk to the president, but we're also, remember, he's just one of others. He wasn't the only one. It wasn't just him and, Lisa Page and the others who were in that meeting. Apparently, according to the Times, and we know this from the anonymous op-ed that the Times published, which I think they published based on the fact that they were already working on this story. There are other people in the administration that were in cahoots with Rod Rosenstein. So as Greg said, there needs to be a full-fledged investigation. This is really literally an extension of what we're seeing as a silent coup or a white coup to overthrow, to remove a duly elected president of the United States. And this is why they've tried to corner President Trump, saying, oh, well, even if you know this information to be true, even if it's proven true, you can't get rid of Rod Rosenstein because now all of a sudden we're going to come at you tooth and nail and hold you accountable and say that this is obstruction. No, this is a president of the United States. And under Article 2, he has every authority to remove someone who is a danger to his presidency if he so chooses, and for any reason. So there needs to be an investigation.
Well, I think the president, and the New York Post pointed this out in an editorial today, Greg, is in a terrible position because the media that has been pushing a phony, fake, false narrative for 2 years, they would pounce on the legitimate firing of Rosenstein as a means of turning this into a Friday night massacre, the equivalent of a Saturday night massacre in Watergate, because they've been using those analogies forever. But yet the guy clearly deserves to be fired. Now, it is Jeff Sessions' Department of Justice, and here we're back to the same old question. Where's Jeff? Why is Jeff not involved? Why is Jeff not interviewing Rod Rosenstein? Why is Jeff not This is his department. He would have the authority to fire the deputy attorney general.
He absolutely would. He should exercise at minimum. And your instincts are right. This would be the Friday night massacre as opposed to the Saturday night massacre or whatever night it takes place. That's the media would howl with their hair on fire. And so the way to handle this, it seems to me, is for Sessions to ask Rosenstein to recuse himself temporarily pending an investigation by Congress or the Inspector General or both. You're not firing him. You're simply removing him pending the results of an investigation. And I think that's the way to go. And there's plenty of reasons for that removal or recusal temporarily because of the multiple conflicts of interest that Rosenstein has. And given the New York Times story, and it does appear to be true. I don't believe for a moment he was being sarcastic. And the New York Times stands by their sources.
They adamantly stand by. And interesting, the New York Times, of all people, they held back. They said they reached out to dozens of people in the second allegation against Judge Kavanaugh. They couldn't find a single person in a week that would corroborate what this woman is saying from Yale. But stay right there. We'll continue more with Greg Jarrett and Sara Carter.